Thanks for watching and welcome you back. This is our third video in our series. Today we are going to look at playing in the key of D. So we're going to be checking out a D chord and some inversions as well as some extensions on the D. We've learned a G chord. We're going to be looking at G2 and G add 9 today. The A chord and the A sus, and then our minor chord in the key of D, the B minor. Just to warn you, you're going to find this one as our first kind of more difficult chord. We're going to introduce the concept of barring across multiple strings with one finger, and so you might have to spend some more time working on it, but if you stay with it, I'm sure you can get it. So let's look in the key of D. And so here we have the chords we're going to look at today in the key of D. The D, the G2, we're also going to look at the G add 9, and A sus, and we'll also look at just a straight A, and the B minor 7, which is going to be our first kind of hardcore chord. It's called a bar chord. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get there, but that'll be one of the first chords that you may have to spend some time really kind of working on and to work through to be able to get to really get a handle on it. And then I got an couple alternate fingerings that might help that we'll look at in as we go through, and one of them in the bonus section of chords. So let's just take a moment and let's pull up just the D chord. I'm at the D and the D sus. If you remember from the key of G, we looked at the D sus, which is right down there in the bottom corner. And if you compare that to the D, you'll see it's pretty similar. And we also want to keep in mind of that D sus when we get to the G2. We want to compare those two as well. So the D is a 4-string chord. We're going to have the D string open. We're going to put the first finger on the G string at the 2nd fret. And the third finger, ring finger, on the B string at the 3rd fret. And the 2nd fret of the E string with the second or middle finger. It's a pretty simple chord. You want to work on strumming as well. You strum up and down, full strums, to only play the top 4 strings, because if you hit all 6 strings, it can sound bad. If you want to, just take your thumb and just semi-wrap it around so it mutes that E string. The A string, if it's open, the A is in the chord, so if you got a bass player or somebody playing down low that's covering the bass note, if you get the A string in there, it's not going to be as noticeable. But still, it's not a bad thing to learn to be able to strum full strums, but only play certain strings. In this case, the top 4 strings. So that might be your challenge on the D string while you're doing that, just to kind of get. And then in the D sus, which remember, we just can take that little finger and put it on the 3rd fret. That's a sound you hear a lot. So that's the D. Because we've had the D sus earlier, this is not terribly new. Because we do have some chords that we've kind of looked at, I wanted to take a moment. I want to talk about picks. Haven't talked about picks yet. There's all kinds of picks. They're made out of all kinds of material. I use a Dunlop nylon pick as opposed to a plastic or cellulose pick. I have a personal reason for that, which doesn't really make any difference in this discussion. The size I use is the 0.6 or 0.60 millimeters. The thing I would say about picks, find one and kind of stick with it. Learn to use it. Different people use different ones. Brian May of Queen uses a halfpenny, a coin. I think Nick Jones, a Foreigner, makes his picks out of seashells that he picks up on the And so different people do different things. Might go get a collection if you have much experience. Different. You can go to the music store. You can buy one or two individual. Costs a little bit more to do that. But they're not that expensive. Try a handful of picks, see what you like, and then pick one, and then stay with it. Learn to make that pick a tool that you've mastered. Because like I said, I don't think there's any one pick that's right or wrong. I have a handful of different picks in different sizes available to me. Have them on my desk here, but this is just the one I always use, and that's the one I've learned to use. I've been using this one probably over 20 years, and I think it's ultimately you pick one and it's what you learn to use. I have friends who swear by other picks, different styles, whatever reason. I'm not a big technique guy on picks. I'll be honest, my pick turns around. I've just learned to make it work. You can find videos, I'm sure, on picks and technique, and to me it's just it's a tool, and I try to work. I'm working on my electric playing a little lighter. I might actually go to a lighter pick, but my thing on picks is find one that you like, that you can use. Learn to master using that tool. Don't be trying to switch it up and think because somebody's doing this, well, that's the magic thing. I think ultimately everybody picks their tool and they learn to control it, to use it, and to master it. So that's on picks. That's my input on picks. And you probably find as many people with different opinions as there are on picks to buy. And so I wouldn't get caught up too much, but I would kind of try to land on one and learn to really get a handle on it. I mentioned the D sus. I'll just compare them, and you'll look and see the D sus. You'll see the similarity, and we want to go ahead and take a moment and let's pull up the G chord we're going to look at, which is the G2 and the G add 9. And so I want you to get that D sus in your mind. And then let's pull up that G chord. All right, here's that G2, and you can see that if you look at that G2, you can see that D sus, and we're just taking the middle finger and we're taking it off of that E string, and we're reaching across. We're hitting the 3rd fret of the low E string. See there in the video, and that's the G2. If you remember our regular G chord from the G, and that first finger is now just on the G string 2nd fret. So if you were to practice going between the D and the G2, you'd have that D chord. You're just taking and putting the little finger down, and you're reaching across with the middle or the 2nd finger. So we're moving 2 fingers. We're keeping the 1st finger and the 3rd finger right where they were. And then the G add 9 is a little different than the G2. We are taking the 3rd finger off. We're letting that B string ring open on the add 9. And you can hear it's got a little different kind of sound to it. It's kind of a little bit more ethereal sounding. G2, add 9. I will say this, remind you that a lot of chord charts, this chord in the key of D may just be a G. So you can, whenever you see that in the key of D and you see a G, experiment with playing the 2 or experiment with using the add 9. If neither one sound right, just play the normal G. And you may see a G2, may see a G9, G add 9. Again, you might experiment with the other, see if that one sounds better. Mom will eventually make another video explaining the 2 and the add 9 chords specifically, and how and why people use them interchangeably. You just can't assume that the person who wrote the chord charts is using a 2 or add 9 in what we would call a theoretically correct manner. And they may actually be playing an add 9 and calling it a 2. That's just a heads up. Be giving you permission to experiment interchanging these chords a little bit when we're playing in the key of D, and see which one may sound good or sound better. But I do want you to see that correlation between the G2, that D sus, and then reaching across. And yeah, just take your time, go practice like four beats on each chord, and just changing back and forth between the D and the G2. Doing it on the upstroke. 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1. So if you can see there on the upstroke of the 4, and we're using that upstroke time to make the change. So that's the G2 and G add 9. The sus chord, we've been learning a sus chord in every key, and in this case it will be the A. I did bring up the regular A. You'll see that as well quite a bit. In the key of E, we looked at the A2, and today we're going to now have the full A, or the A sus. So if you're looking down there in the bottom corner, the 1, we're using the first, second finger on the 2nd fret of the D string and the G string, and then we're putting the 3rd finger on the 3rd fret of the B string. If you have large fingers, we are putting a lot of fingers in the same fret next to one another. If you look at the A string, we just take that 3rd finger and slide it down for the regular A chord to the 2nd fret. So if you have big fingers, you may find that to be a little bit more challenge to get them to speak. Just keep working at it until you can do that. That's the A sus. So if we were going from a D to the A sus, and that's one of the first biggest motions we're going to make. We're going to keep the little finger, not the little finger, we're going to keep the middle finger, the 3rd finger, in place. We're going to move the 1st and 2nd finger to their assigned strings. It's a pretty simple motion. Move the 1st finger to the D string, the 2nd finger to the G string. They both stay on the 2nd fret. As you're working on these and working on making these changes, it will help. If you actually kind of stop and get a mental picture of what you're moving and where you're moving, it will help. So you just want to take some time again and practice going between the D and the A, or the A sus. You might try the G2 to the A, and this is going to be, again, we're going to be moving the 1st and 2nd fingers, but they got a little different kind of motion because we got to move that 2nd finger down into a different fret. The G to the A sus. G, A sus. let's go ahead and play a D, a G, A, D, and we'll play the G2, the A sus, and the D. So it's going to be the G2, A sus, to the D, back to the G, to the A sus, to the D. Now let's substitute that sus. Let's play normal A in place of the A sus to the A. A lot more motion down to the D. G2, A, to the D. Yeah, just take some time and work on doing that and getting used to making those changes. Both using the A sus and the A. The B minor 7. Now this is our first bar chord, and we call it a bar chord. If you look up there in the top right hand corner, we are using the first finger to play both the A string, the G string, and the E string in this chord. So it has to lay across, be a bar. Kind of hard to see here. It's not completely flat against the strings, but you're also not completely on the side, unless you've got mad twist your arm skills. So it's kind of the edge. You know, I'm playing on the let me get if I can get it here. Here we go. So I'm not here, I'm not here, I'm kind of here on my finger. So it's rolled over just a little bit. Also, it matters how I hold the instrument. Setting down here is not a way I'm used to holding it. For this, it helps to be a little higher. And then I'm using my my third finger then on the 4th fret of the D string, and my 2nd finger on the 3rd fret of the B string. In case it's a little more difficult, I put the regular B minor. Being able to use your 4th finger on the 4th fret of the G string might help. And then you're only having to play the low B, or the A string and the E string with your 1st finger at the 2nd fret. You'll want your thumb for the bar probably right behind the bar, if I can turn it here so you can see. So my thumb is kind of right behind the 1st finger, helping me push down. If you're having lots and lots of problems with that bar, you might check your setup on your guitar. If the strings are too far away from the neck, it can be really difficult to play a bar chord. The closer we are to the nut, sometimes the more difficult it is to push down multiple strings. 2nd fret usually isn't too bad. This guitar, I sometimes will play this B minor instead of the B minor 7. It just kind of sounds better. For some reason, sometimes. It just depends on the song. Okay. Again, there may be one you have to work on. If you stop and analyze that B minor 7, you will see the strings that are similar to all the chords. So if you look at that B minor 7, you look at the top 3 strings, what do you see there? You see a D chord. So if we play the G, B minor, let's not do that. G, A, B, B minor, A, G, D. Just kind of can mix up the chords and get used to moving back and forth between them. The B minor. If we take this bar and we look at it, we could actually, it's going to be real common to see the B minor or B minor 7 go to the A chord. And so let's pull up our bonus chords for a quick look at this A bar, because I do this a lot, and I probably started doing it from playing electric. We play a lot of bar chords on electrics, and we don't have to play all the strings. On electric, sometimes we play only 2 strings at a time of a chord. So I probably got used to barring the A like you see there in the middle. But if I was at the B minor and and it's real common to be followed by an A, I just keep that bar. Let me pull up the fretboard and you can see that. There we go. So we got the B minor to the A. So I'm just using that first finger, just keeping it in place. But on the B minor, you just want to look. And while we're talking about it, you'll see there next to the A bar chord, we have a B minor, or B minor 7 really it is, but it's a little different. So I'm taking the first finger and putting it on the 2nd fret of the A string. I'm playing the G string open, so I'm not barring this. I am playing 2nd fret of the G string and 3rd fret of the B string. And you can hear that sounds very similar. Okay. I would say this, I do this a lot in the key of D. If I have a B minor in another key, like if I'm playing in the key of A, and B minor might show up in the key of A, I probably would not play this fingering. I would play the B minor or B minor 7, the other fingering that we just learned. But this works in the key of D because we're keeping, again, compare this to the D chord. In fact, you got the D2 down there, and you compare that, it's very, very similar. So when we're playing in these keys, one of the things we're doing is we are keeping as many similar notes from one chord to the next as we possibly can. So when we do a D, a B minor, that other fingering is very effective, and sometimes it's more effective. So when I'm playing in the key of D, a lot of times I will use that fingering because I think it sounds better. So feel free as you learn more chords and more fingerings and more different ways of playing the same chord to pick and choose and experiment with them. Not picking one because it's easier, but picking one because that sound works in the song better. And experiment and experience will tell you. You know, like I said, I play in D enough. I know what that alternate B minor fingering is going to sound like, and so when I use it, it's pretty effective. I'm not really having to experiment that much. The E minor 7. We had the E minor 7 in the key of G. So it also shows up in the key of D some. Not a lot, but you will run into it. So we don't need to talk through how to play that. We've already did that in the key of G lesson. The D over F sharp. We got the D, we're going to take our thumb, we're going to wrap it around the top, and we're going to grab the E string at the 2nd fret and just kind of squeeze until it plays. If you reach on over and you dampen the A, it won't matter. If you don't dampen it and it rings, that won't matter as much. It will probably sound a little better with it dampened because when the notes get lower, the farther apart they are, the better they'll sound. The overtones start to really muddy up the sound when we're at the lowest end of the spectrum and we're less than an octave apart. and the A would be, open A would be less than an octave from that low F sharp. So that's the D over F sharp. Now if we went back to the E minor 7, this is where we're going to see the E minor 7. We're going to see that E minor 7 to D over F sharp to the G2 a lot, to the A. There I am barring it and sussing it at the same time. D. So that's where you're going to see the E minor 7. You're going to see that low E minor. You're going to see it walking up to the F sharp, walking up to the G. That'll be a very common walk up, both in the key of G and in the key of D. Okay. So that's the D over F sharp. If your fingers are, if you're a younger player and your hands is smaller, you know, being able to keep that D and reach over might be a little more difficult. As in all things related to younger players, your hands will grow. So keep working at it, and eventually your hand will get bigger and you will be able to do that without as much trouble. And I threw the D2 in here because this will show up in the key of D a lot. So D2 is, it's like that regular D chord, but we're just going to take and we're going to play the E string open. And so it's got kind of a sound, a vibe to it. It's going to be real common to go to an A sus, keep that open E string. Again, if we're playing a D2 and there's going to be a B minor, that's definitely a place I'll use this other fingering. So if I got that D2 to a B minor 7, and then I will go ahead and I'll play that E string open on that B minor chord. Even though you can see from the diagram it would be dampened normally. But I'm just keeping all these constant, all these strings common sounds in strings, and so that's another way of just kind of spicing up that B minor 7 in the key of D. It'll be very common to see a D2 and just feel like changing it to a normal D. D sus to D. We hear this a lot. So feel free to experiment. Play the normal chords, add the sus to it, go back and forth. Use your ears. Experiment. You'll start to create kind of your style and your sound, which will be unique to you. But using these chords. And so I think that covers all the chords in the key of D that we want to look at. It's just to encourage you to keep working and keep practicing that B minor 7. Like I said, it's a little bit more difficult. Just go ahead and dig into it. Keep working on it until you get it. Learning to bar these chords is something that we'll be working on down the road as we get into to some other chords that require to use one finger to push down more than one string. So it's an important technique. Key of D, that B minor, like I said, that's the first kind of really hard chord we've had to learn. Also want to encourage you to start to really get a mental picture of all these chords we've learned. Take some time, study the diagram, because again, later on down the road, this will really help if we have a really good mental picture of these chords as we start to add some advanced techniques to some very basic shapes on the guitar and it will help you be able to expand your playing into some advanced techniques that actually can sound harder. Doesn't need to be as hard as it appears if we have a really good understanding of these chords. So just kind of start to make a good mental picture of all these chords we've learned. The G, now we have the G2 or the G add 9, we have the D sus that we've done, the A sus as well. We have the B minor, we have that E minor 7. And so we start to get really good mental pictures of these chords, because eventually we're going to start to be doing some unique things. And if we can understand the picture and picture them really quickly in our head, it will help us understand what's going on. So keep working, keep practicing. I thank you for watching. I worked on this video for probably about three weeks. I haven't actually filmed any for a few weeks. I built a shed. Different things. Actually, the intro, I think I had a haircut since I did the intro and this. But keep playing, keep working, and we'll see you. The next key we're going to be in is A. So and we will see you on the next video. Have a good day.